to chat with you. I know that there's a lot of people who could benefit from what you do who probably aren't even aware of what counseling is about and all these things. So,
Yeah.
the purpose of this session is for us to highlight your business, and then that interview is something that you can use on your social media or whatever you want to do to promote your business. So, is there something specifically you would like to focus on? Is there a practice or a group that you tend to? Is it more marital counseling? Is it youth? Is it addiction? Is there a specific area you focus on, or all the above?
So, Connectivity started back in 2012, basically in earnest. And at the beginning, I was mainly addictions. And in the last couple of years, we've kind of ballooned. I brought on a bunch of people to work as contractors with me, sort of team members. And so it's much more diversified now. I personally sort of focus on impulse control issues. So I'm kind of known as the ADHD guy, but anxiety, trauma, OCD to some degree, PTSD, all the fun stuff, anger and aggression, and to some degree, addiction. Some of my other counselors are more addictions focused. I have a few counselors that specialize in working with kids. I have worked with kids in the past, but I wouldn't say it's my area of specialty, like in terms of like training parents. So I do a lot of working with parents to help them with their kids, but I don't work with the kids directly.
Yeah.
So I do these, professional development workshops or parent information community events. And then there's, a lot of people afterwards that want me to meet with their kids, but I sort of steer them to my other counselors who specialize in kids.
Yeah, for sure. And, really all kids become parents and or adults, and most of the people viewing this interview will be adults who may be an area where they could use some help. We all need support once in a while. Yeah. And so would you say that, like, in terms of people who get counseling, are they people who need to have been diagnosed with some kind of disorder? Or would you say that you see a lot of people who are just wanting to work on their own mental health, their relationships,
It's evolved over the years, definitely. It used to be addictions a lot, and you're not necessarily diagnosed with an addiction. Your life just kind of tells you that you have a problem. And then it evolved into more of the impulse control stuff. And so with ADHD specifically, especially with adults, a lot of adults are coming, let's say their child is going through this diagnostic or assessment process, and a lot of red flags are popping up for themselves. And they're thinking, this sounds a lot like me. And so there aren't many counselors out there who work with adult ADHD, and I'm one of them. And so a lot of people will come in and say, I'm starting to think this might be a thing, and I kind of want to get a professional's opinion on it. I can't diagnose them, but I can effectively screen them at least. And some have been diagnosed. And so the doctors sort of said, here, go talk to this guy. He can help you more than I can with that stuff. Diagnosis of the label can be useful, a form of shorthand when professionals are talking to each other. It can be useful. When I was diagnosed myself with ADHD, it was like, oh, that's what that is. Because before that, it was just a collection of things that I wasn't good at.
right.
Were annoying to me and other people. And I was like, no, that's actually this thing. Oh,
Yes.
Oh, and millions of people are that way. Oh, okay, that's useful information for me. So for a lot of times with adults, I would say more so than with kids, with adults, the diagnosis itself is like half the treatment, because they finally have an explanation that isn't laziness, or stupidity,
Right.
those kinds of things.
I think you can't finish anything or whatever.
Right. So, there's a famous psychiatrist author, Irving Yalom, and he says, it's a lot easier to diagnose somebody after one session than it is after 10 sessions, right? Because people are complex, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of things cross over, and it's like, what's this? No, maybe it's this. I don't know. You got a lot of stuff going on. Let's figure it out over time.
Yeah, for sure. And when you work with people, would you say it's kind of a one and done, or is there like a layered approach where you have them kind of go and address certain areas of their life or do activities or?
Yeah, again, some people are coming to me for consultation, so they might be meeting with a different counselor, and then ADHD's come up, or something that I might specialize in, and that counselor's aware of me, and they'll say, go talk to Ted about that specific thing. And so for those people, sometimes it's one and done. Generally, it's not. Most, I was talking with someone earlier today. We all want to go from obliviousness about what the problem is to preventing the problem in one step, but there's a whole process of realizing what's happening, how it came to be, and sort of catching ourselves in the moment that eventually leads to prevention. And I would say, popular psychology, and as counseling and therapy is portrayed in media, movies, is probably not doing us a great service, because it sort of has this sort of guru on the mountaintop kind of idea that you come see me, I give you some brilliant insight, it changes your life, and then you're free.
Right.
And it's just not. I equate it more to learning a new language, and that I would say to somebody, if you were parachuted into a foreign country, you're born in Canada, you parachuted into China, and you meet with your Chinese tutor once a week for an hour, it would take you a while to learn Chinese. And so it's a similar thing. It's because these ways of relating to the world and to ourselves, they've been there since the beginning, and we're trying to change sort of, in some ways, our fundamental way of seeing the world. So yeah, it can be a lengthy process for sure.
Yeah.
I try and give people things to work on between sessions, just partly to empower them to realize, you're the biggest part of this. I'm a sounding board and an expert in some things. I can teach you some things, but ultimately it comes down to you deciding to do something that's hard every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Approaching things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So have you noticed a difference in your clientele, either the volume or individuals, over the last year and a half with quarantine and so on?
I wouldn't say. A lot of people have asked me that. Oh, I guess business is booming for you. I mean, it was booming already. Mental health is unfortunately a growth industry. You're never going to run out of people to talk to.
For sure.
Certainly the topics have changed, or it was interesting. At the beginning, it was all about COVID and the world is ending, and anxiety, and people with OCD that had sort of worked through it and were able to tell themselves, it's all in my head. And now the prime minister is saying, no, it's not, wash your hands or everyone's going to die. And they're like, oh,
Right.
So there was a big sort of spike of that. And then it seemed to calm back down into the usual relationship problems and procrastination and, anxiety and those things. But as it's dragged on and on, there's what I'm finding for a lot of people is it's almost more like existential purposelessness kind of issues. Like, what is the point of all this?
Right.
And that's across the age span, right? Older people thinking, what kind of a world are we leaving here, to younger people thinking, what kind of a world am I about to inherit, and everything in between. So a lot of things end up coming back around to that.
Which is probably the biggest question we all have at some point in our lives, right? It's like COVID has sort of triggered it for many people. And I know I've volunteered on the Kids Help Phone, and in many of those conversations, it becomes this sort of, what's the point, right? And COVID, or the alienation of it, or the fear of it, has sort of triggered that in a few people, for sure.
One thing that's spiked statistically is young people with eating disorders during COVID. And it's not because everyone suddenly is body conscious, but because most of the time eating disorders are rooted in a feeling of powerlessness. And so my body and my intake of food, that's a thing I can control the heck out of if big things in my life are out of my control. And so the world is, on fire. People are feeling very powerless. And that seems to be a way that a lot of young people, boys and girls, men and women, seem to be finding themselves coping with that. So, and domestic violence is much higher especially during lockdown periods.
Right.
And one thing we know about humans is that when there's the unknown, we tend to grasp onto something as if we know it. And so what that tends to translate to is people make big decisions about relationships when there's a lot of traumatic things happening around. So to either start or end relationships. So a lot of people, and you would say, oh yeah, well, you spend all that time together in lockdown. That's not actually the reason that's driving it. It's just sort of like, life is uncertain. I don't want to waste my time with something I'm not sure of, so I'm out. Or
Right.
the other way, people are like, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just commit. I just need to have a thing that I know is a thing, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see a few years from now, the fallout of those decisions.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I've got 2 teens at home getting ready to go back to school, and they're hoping things will be normal. I mean, who's to say, right? Even a week from now, things can change as we go. What would be one tip you could give, teens or young adults that are sort of trying to cope with the up and down of how things are changing day to day and dealing with change and adversity? What is one sort of self-coping mechanism they could adopt?
Well, I mean, at the risk of sounding like homespun wisdom, when the lockdown first happened, my wife Tina and I were on a walk, so the kids are all home, and we've got 5 kids ourselves, all teenagers. And she was saying, I kind of wish they didn't have to go back to school. And I said, why? And she said, because when you're in high school, you just think nothing matters more than high school. And ultimately, when you leave high school, nothing is less important than high school.
Right.
And when the kids are home, they were sort of insulated from that. And that sort of really is my sort of like go-to tip for kids with school stress. And my oldest daughter's high achieving sort of perfectionist type. And, since elementary school, middle school, I was, man, just relax. It's just grade 7. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And even now, as she's, going into her 4th year of university, I'm saying, hey, relax. It's just university.
Yeah.
Like at the end of your life, are you going to look back on your grade in this class? If so, something's gone wrong, right? Like it's hard though, because when you're in it, that's
everything. Yeah.
It is everything. And so I guess that would be my advice. It's like, relax. It's just school. It's temporary. One day you're not going to have to worry about all that stuff about who's cool and who's not, and who's wearing what, and what your grades are, and you'll be able to move on with your life. I know I sound like an old guy saying that, but it's true. Those old guys know something.
It's great wisdom. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So if those who are watching this video say, hey, Ted seems like a wise guy, and I think I might have some ADHD or some issues that I could use some support with, what's the best way for them to get started with you or your team?
So our website, connectivitycounselling.com, it was designed by a local company as well, some friends of mine, and they did a really good job. There's a contact form in there. You can contact us that way. You could email us, office@connectivitycounselling.com, or you could call our office number, 604-300-2633. My wife, Tina, she's sort of the office coordinator, thank goodness. And she manages the schedules of everybody, and she's good at sort of connecting people with the counselor that is a good fit, but also available, because we're not all equally available. That's probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, that's great. And I know Tina, she's an incredibly warm and welcoming person. She doesn't bite. So anyone watching this, if you're curious or you just have some questions, you can always reach out on the website there, and they'll fill you in on some of your options there to get started. If you need some support, reach out. Here's just one way you can do it. And thanks for your time, Ted. We'll see some of your little ones back at school there, and we'll catch up with you down the road here.
Okay. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks.